Picture this for a moment. A man wakes up every single morning with a firm intention to change his life. He works hard, he pushes forward, he makes plans, and genuinely believes in a better future. But night after night, when the house goes quiet and no one is watching, he unlocks his phone and disappears into a world that leaves him completely drained. By morning, something barely noticeable has shifted in him. Not his mood, not his thoughts, but something far deeper. Something that cannot be captured in a single word, yet shows up unmistakably in his voice, in the way he carries himself, in how other people respond to his presence. This is exactly the mechanism we are going to talk about here. Invisible, yet steadily destructive. Most people, when trying to explain their financial stagnation, look outward. They point to the economy, to an unfair system, to a lack of startup capital or the right connections. These explanations are convenient because they shift personal responsibility elsewhere. But ancient Buddhist wisdom, preserved in the teachings of the Dhammapada and the deep studies of the nature of mind, points in an entirely different direction. It says that the root of most life failures lies not in external circumstances, but in how a person spends their inner energy, the very force that the Buddhist tradition calls life force, or prana. And the first, most widespread and least recognized way this energy gets wasted is through the consumption of impure images. Buddhist teaching states directly, attention is the beginning of every action. What a person directs their gaze and their mind toward either feeds their inner light or systematically extinguishes it. This is not a metaphor or a religious abstraction. It is a precise description of a psychophysiological mechanism that modern science confirms with striking accuracy. When a person consumes visual content designed to trigger arousal without purpose or direction, the brain releases a massive surge of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter activated by hard drugs. The nervous system enters a state of artificial excitement. The life force activates and immediately scatters into emptiness, creating nothing, moving toward no goal, serving no real intention whatsoever. This is exactly where the Buddhist concept of energy and intention becomes essential. According to this teaching, the universe is structured in such a way that abundance constantly moves toward every person. It does not punish. It does not pass anyone by. It seeks a path to you every single day. But if a person's inner vessel is damaged, that energy flows in from the top and immediately leaks out from the bottom, leaving no trace, no fruit, nothing. The person works hard, reaches for something better, puts in real effort, and still stays in the same place, unable to understand where all that effort disappears to. Impure images are one of the primary reasons for this leak, and one that most men do not take seriously precisely because it happens in the dark and feels harmless. But the consequences are anything but harmless. They show up in things that are hard to measure but easy to feel, in how a man holds himself during a negotiation, in whether people actually hear what he says, in whether he radiates a sense of inner strength or inner emptiness. There was a man, we will call him Elijah, who spent years unable to understand why his business deals fell apart at the exact moment everything seemed already decided. The talent was there, the vision was clear, the strategy was solid. But every single night, he was methodically draining the very reservoir of energy that magnetic presence, confidence, and the ability to persuade are drawn from. When he made the decision to walk away from this habit for 40 days, no exceptions, no compromises, something happened that he himself described as impossible to explain. His presence in meeting rooms became different. People started listening to him in a way they never had before. Within 2 months, he closed 3 major contracts, not because the market had changed, but because he had stopped destroying his own foundation every night. Solving this problem does not require willpower in the conventional sense. It requires a clear-eyed understanding of what is actually at stake. This is not about morality in a narrow sense. It is about energy economics. A builder does not burn his fuel for nothing, because he understands that this resource is finite, and every single unit of it must go toward creating something real. Blocking access to sources of impure images, deleting the apps that enable it, building an environment that does not constantly push toward relapse. None of this is weakness. None of this is restriction for restriction's sake. It is the deliberate decision of a man who knows his own worth and knows exactly where he is headed. This reason for energy leakage can be eliminated, and many who have taken that step describe the first few weeks as a sudden clearing, as though a fog lifts that you had stopped noticing only because it had been there so long. But the next reason is built differently. It has nothing to do with what a man looks at. It has everything to do with what he does in solitude. And it is precisely this that Buddhist teachers have called the most devastating act of self-robbery a man commits against himself. Willingly, repeatedly, and almost never with any awareness of the true scale of what he is losing. There is a loss no one talks about out loud, not because it is insignificant, but because it has become so deeply woven into the daily life of the modern man that it has long stopped feeling like a loss at all. It happens in silence, in solitude, with no witnesses, and that is precisely why its destructive effect accumulates over years, staying invisible until the moment a person begins asking himself honestly, "Why, with all my effort, are my results so disproportionately small? Why do I have energy in the morning, and where does it completely vanish by evening? Why do the grand plans born in moments of inspiration never receive the momentum they need to become real?" Buddhist tradition has pointed toward the same answer with remarkable consistency for thousands of years. A person's life force, the very prana discussed in the previous section, is not an infinite resource that automatically replenishes itself. It accumulates, concentrates, and when managed correctly, transforms into what could be called inner magnetism, the ability to attract the right people, to see the right solutions, to act from a place of clarity rather than anxiety. But this same force can scatter, and one of its primary channels of dissipation is the unconscious, intentionless squandering of male essence. Buddhist teachers, particularly within the Tantric Buddhist tradition, and schools that work with energy preservation practices, described this process with a precision that has not aged a single day. They used the image of a bow and arrow. Life force is like a drawn bowstring. The longer it is held in tension, the more consciously a person manages this potential, the farther and more accurately the arrow of their intention flies, into work, into creativity, into the construction of real results. But if the string is released every time the tension becomes uncomfortable, the arrow drops at your feet, and the man stands in the same place again, draws the bow again, releases again, and genuinely cannot understand why the target remains out of reach. It is important to be clear. This is not about asceticism for its own sake, nor about suppressing natural impulses out of fear or guilt. The Buddhist approach is fundamentally different from simple prohibition. It speaks of something else entirely, of awareness, of direction, of investing energy where it creates value rather than dissolving into momentary relief. The difference between a man who spends his life force unconsciously and regularly and a man who has learned to retain and redirect it is not a difference in morality. It is a difference in outcomes that are visible to the naked eye. This is exactly what those who commit to a conscious period of preservation discover, even just 7 consecutive days. The first thing they describe is not heroic struggle, but something far more subtle and simultaneously far more powerful. A mental clarity appears that has been absent for so long that its absence had become the new normal. A confidence emerges that no longer needs external validation. A creative energy wakes up that had been lying dormant somewhere deep, occasionally surfacing in flashes of inspiration that would extinguish themselves almost immediately. This is not magic, and it is not self-suggestion. It is simply a vessel that, for the first time in a long time, begins to fill rather than empty faster than it can be replenished. The practice starts small but demands firmness. 7 days of full, conscious preservation, like a sacred fast, like an offering made to your own future. Not as punishment, but as an experiment whose results speak louder than any words. Buddhist teachers recommended this exact time frame as the minimum threshold after which changes become tangible, not at the level of ideas, but at the level of real lived experience. In how a man thinks, how he speaks, how those around him perceive him. After 7 days comes 21. After 21 comes 40. Each successive milestone unlocks a new level of that inner resource, whose very existence most men are unaware of, simply because they have never given it the opportunity to accumulate. 2 reasons for energy loss have now been named, and both involve what a man does when he is alone with himself. But the third reason is built on an entirely different principle. It does not unfold in solitude. It plays out in the closest and seemingly safest space in human life. Buddhist tradition does not condemn this space. It considers it one of the greatest sources of strength and growth available to a person. And yet, it is precisely here that most men lose a staggering amount of energy without ever realizing it. Because from the outside, everything looks completely normal. There is a space in a person's life that is considered intimate and untouchable. A space where it seems no leaks, no losses could possibly exist, because we are talking about closeness, about warmth, about what people call love, or at least something close to it. Buddhist tradition never condemned this space. On the contrary, it regarded the union between a man and a woman as one of the most powerful sources of spiritual growth and life force available, as an opportunity for both people to rise to a new level of awareness. And yet it is precisely here, in this seemingly safest of places, that most men lose a staggering amount of energy, completely unaware of it, because from the outside, everything looks entirely natural and normal. The key to understanding this paradox lies in one word that Buddhist teachers used with surgical precision: intention. It is not the union itself that determines whether it fills the vessel or empties it. What determines it is the intention with which a person enters that union. The Buddhist concept of the yasad energy, the foundation, the channel through which life force descends into material reality, points directly to this distinction. When 2 people come together in awareness, in a shared drive to build something, in a sense of common direction and common purpose, their energies do not simply add up, they multiply. Around such a union forms what can only be described as a field of attraction. It draws in the right decisions, the right people, the right circumstances. This is not a metaphor. It is a description of a real energetic process that any attentive person can observe in their own life. But when a man enters physical intimacy without that intention, without direction, without a spiritual dimension, without asking where this connection is going and what it is actually creating, the exact opposite happens. The yasad energy activates and immediately scatters in every direction at once, and energy scattered in every direction simultaneously builds nothing. It simply disappears, quietly, invisibly, leaving no trace except a feeling of inexplicable emptiness that many men attribute to fatigue, to stress, to anything at all except the real cause. Buddhist texts describe the story of a king who, during a period of the most severe famine and hardship, managed not only to preserve his household, but to multiply it several times over within a single year. The teachers who commented on this story pointed to one thing: his prosperity was inseparable from the integrity of his inner space. His vessel had no cracks, and so the abundance that was constantly seeking a path to people found him. This was not luck or privilege. It was the direct result of how he built his connections, with intention, with awareness, with deep respect for the force that those connections either generate or destroy. The practical application of this understanding begins with one simple but genuinely honest question that Buddhist teachers recommended asking before every act of intimacy. The question is this: does this connection elevate my soul, or does it merely quiet it for a moment? Does it strengthen my inner foundation, or does it open another gap in its walls? The question sounds simple, but the answer, given with full honesty, has the power to reshape every decision a man makes in this area of his life. Because a person who begins asking this question consistently will inevitably begin making different choices. And different choices, stacking up day after day, create a fundamentally different life. Awareness in this area is not restriction and not a renunciation of life's pleasures. It is a tool for the precise calibration of the inner resource that determines literally everything: the quality of thinking, the level of confidence, the strength of presence, the ability to create and sustain favorable circumstances. A man who has learned to enter intimacy with intention and leave it feeling full rather than drained is a man whose vessel operates on a completely different level. He does not spend, he invests. And that investment returns to him in forms that cannot be scheduled in advance, but cannot be missed once they arrive. 3 reasons have now been laid out, and all 3 are connected in some way to how a person manages their energy in moments when no one is watching. But the 4th reason operates on a completely different level. It does not hide in the dark and does not require solitude. It strikes openly, in broad daylight, in the most ordinary moments of everyday life. And its voice does not sound like temptation. It sounds like common sense, like a deserved reward, like the voice of fairness itself. That is exactly what makes it more dangerous than everything that came before it. It does not hide in the dark. It does not require solitude and does not wait for everyone to fall asleep. It comes in broad daylight, when you are exhausted after a long week and your hand reaches for your phone to order whatever feels good right now rather than what you actually need. When after a draining day you open something that gives you instant relief instead of taking one more step toward a goal that requires time. When that inner voice tells you, and tells you very convincingly, that you have earned this, that you have worked hard enough. That one time does not count. That voice is the primary guardian of your financial cage. And the most dangerous thing about it is that it does not sound like temptation. It sounds like common sense. Buddhist tradition describes this inner mechanism with exceptional precision. In the Pali texts of the Tipitaka, it is referred to by a concept that can be translated as a clouding of the mind, a deeply rooted tendency of consciousness to seek immediate relief at any cost, to avoid discomfort by any available means, and to always choose what feels good now at the expense of what creates real value tomorrow. This is not a character flaw and not a moral failing. It is the default setting of the human brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution, a setting that helped our ancestors survive in the ancient world, but in a modern world with its endless sources of instant pleasure, becomes one of the primary mechanisms of self-destruction. Buddhist texts tell of a figure who became the symbol of this mistake in its most concentrated form. He was strong, capable, and driven. A hunter, a warrior, a man of action. He had everything required to build something truly great. But in one single moment, in one instant of weakness in the face of an immediate desire, he traded his entire future, all his potential, all his inheritance, his entire royal destiny, for a bowl of lentil soup. One impulsive decision. One moment when the voice of instant pleasure was louder than the voice of long-term vision. And it was over. The teachers called this moment the essence of human tragedy. Not because the man was bad, but because he was not present enough in the critical moment of choice. The difference between a man who spends his entire life where he started and a man who builds something real is not determined by intelligence. It is not determined by starting capital, background, or luck. It is determined by one single quality: the ability to delay gratification, the ability to say no to the moment in order to say yes to the future. This quality is not innate and not accidental. It is a skill that is trained consciously, consistently, and ultimately becomes second nature, but only when a person understands exactly what they are building a defense against. The modern world is structured in such a way that attacks on the ability to delay gratification happen literally every single minute. Social media algorithms, the design of streaming platforms, the architecture of online stores, the structure of gaming apps, all of it is built with one purpose: to make instant pleasure as accessible and as irresistible as possible. Each of these interactions, taken individually, seems insignificant. But collectively, they shape a brain habit that then spreads to every area of life, including financial decisions, business choices, and the willingness to invest effort into something that will not pay off today, but will pay off a year from now. A person who has grown accustomed to instant reward in small things gradually loses the ability to hold the tension of a long-term path. And that tension is the only bridge between where he is now and where he wants to be. Buddhist teachers offered a specific tool for working with this mechanism, and it is disarmingly simple. Every time the impulse of instant gratification announces itself, stop. Take 3 deep, conscious breaths and say these words out loud. I choose my future. Not silently, out loud. Because a spoken word reaches not only the conscious mind, but also the deeper layers of the psyche that respond to sound, to vibration, to the physical act of speaking. These 3 words are not an incantation. They are an anchor that reminds your nervous system who you actually are and in which direction you are actually moving. Practice this for 21 consecutive days, and you will not recognize the man you were before. 4 reasons have now been named, and each operates on its own level, in its own space, in its own way. But the 5th, the last and most cunning of all, requires neither darkness nor solitude nor physical impulse. It operates in full daylight, completely out in the open, and most people not only do not defend themselves against it, they are genuinely convinced that what it does to their energy is motivation. That is precisely where its deadly trap lies. It does not require darkness. It has nothing to do with what happens when you are alone. It does not strike in a moment of weakness, and does not seduce with instant pleasure. It operates completely out in the open, in broad daylight, in the most ordinary moments, when you are simply scrolling through your feed, looking at someone else's success, comparing your path to theirs, and telling yourself that it motivates you to keep going. That is exactly where its primary trap lies. A person is genuinely convinced that watching other people's achievements charges their energy. In reality, the exact opposite is happening, and understanding this fully means permanently changing your relationship to where your eyes are pointed every single day. Buddhist tradition regarded envy and self-comparison as one of the most destructive states of mind. Not from a moral standpoint, but from an energetic one. The Pali word isa, which translates as envy or painful comparison, is described in Buddhist texts as a state in which a person voluntarily opens a leak in their inner vessel comparable in scale to all the previous reasons combined. Because at the root of envy lies one fundamental belief that a person broadcasts outward every time they look at someone else's car, someone else's vacation, someone else's success, and feel that familiar sting inside. That belief says, what I have is not enough. Who I am is not enough. And the universe, which always responds to a person's dominant frequency, sends back exactly what they are affirming. More lack, more scarcity, more evidence that they are falling behind. It is necessary to pause here and understand the mechanism with complete clarity because it works more subtly than it appears at first glance. This is not about closing your eyes to other people's achievements or pretending that what happens around you does not concern you. It is about a fundamentally different quality of attention. Buddhist teachers drew a sharp line between two states: mudita, genuine joy at another person's success, which fills your own vessel, and isa, painful comparison, which drains it. On the surface, these two states can look similar, but energetically, they are complete opposites. The first expands, the second contracts. The first attracts abundance. The second repels it. Buddhist texts preserved the words of one of the greatest sages, who said something that sounds almost paradoxical at first. It is not the one who has much who is rich, but the one who rejoices in what they have. For centuries, this saying was interpreted as a call to humility or contentment with little. But that is a profound misreading. In reality, it is a precise description of an energetic law. A person who genuinely rejoices in what they have exists in a state of inner fullness. And inner fullness is exactly the frequency that attracts external abundance. This is not passivity. This is not the abandonment of ambition. This is the correct starting position for any forward movement. Movement from strength, not from fear of scarcity. Social media has become the modern temple of envy, and that is not an exaggeration. Every scroll through the feed, every glance at someone else's house, someone else's career, someone else's relationship, each of these is a potential moment of choice between mudita and isa, between filling and leaking. The average person spends between 2 and 4 hours on social media every single day. That is between 730 and 1,460 hours per year. Hours, a significant portion of which go toward comparing yourself to carefully edited versions of other people's lives. And every such hour spent in a state of painful comparison is an hour of active energy leakage from the very vessel you are trying to fill with all your other efforts. One of the greatest bearers of wisdom in history, acknowledged as such across